The message arrived at 3 in the morning Earth Standard Time. Daniel Carter was already awake, sitting by the window of his small quarters on Station Nexus Prime, watching cargo ships drift between the massive arms of the space station. Sleep had not come easy for him in years. Too many memories, too many ghosts. His communication screen lit up with the golden seal of the Galactic Council. Daniel read the message twice, certain he had misunderstood. The Council wanted him to address the full assembly regarding the war. Him, a human diplomat from a species that most of the galaxy still considered children playing at Starship Travel. He pressed the intercom button on his wall. "Lisa, I need you in my quarters, now." Lisa Morgan arrived within minutes, her dark hair still messy from sleep but her eyes sharp and alert. She was young, barely 30, but she had proven herself as the best communications specialist Earth had ever sent to the station. She read the message on his screen and let out a slow breath. "They want you to speak about the Forever War," she asked. "Why us? Humanity has no stake in that conflict." "That is exactly why they chose us," Daniel said. He stood and walked to the window again. Outside, a warship passed slowly, its red hull marked with scars from countless battles. "They need a neutral species, someone with no history of taking sides." Lisa pulled up data on her tablet, scrolling through information. "The war has been going on for 47 years, billions dead, 12 planets destroyed. Every peace attempt has failed." She looked up at him. "What do they expect you to do?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "They expect me to stand before the Council and formally declare that peace is impossible. They want me to announce that the mediation efforts have failed and that the galaxy should simply accept the war as permanent." "That is terrible," Lisa said. "Yes," Daniel agreed, "it is." He thought about his brother, 8 years ago, had served on a human supply ship that wandered too close to a battle zone. They had destroyed it without warning, killing everyone on board. Daniel had spent years hating them for it. That hatred had nearly consumed him before he found a different path. Now he stood as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. He had worked hard for this position, not for power or fame, but because he believed that someone had to try to make things better. Someone had to believe that peace was possible, even when everyone else had given up. "Get dressed," he told Lisa. "We leave in 1 hour." The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest enclosed space Daniel had ever seen. It stretched upward for hundreds of meters, with floating platforms holding representatives from over 200 species. Light filtered down from crystal panels in the ceiling, casting the entire chamber in soft gold. Daniel walked beside Lisa down the central pathway toward the human delegation's platform. He kept his back straight and his expression calm, but inside his heart was beating fast. Around him, aliens of every shape and size watched the two humans pass, some with curiosity, some with amusement, a few with open contempt. Humanity had only been traveling among the stars for 200 years. To most of the galaxy, they were newcomers, primitives who had barely learned to leave their own solar system. The idea that a human would address the Council on such an important matter was almost laughable to many of the older species. Daniel did not care what they thought. He had learned long ago that being underestimated could be an advantage. The human platform was small, tucked away near the back of the chamber. Lisa activated their translation systems while Daniel studied the two factions seated on opposite sides of the room. On the left sat the delegation. They were tall reptilian beings with scaled skin that shifted between green and brown. Their leader, Ambassador, was ancient by their standards. His scales faded to a pale gray. His yellow eyes watched the chamber with barely hidden anger. On the right sat the collective. They were creatures with multiple limbs and large compound eyes that reflected the light in rainbow patterns. Their leader, High Speaker, stood motionless on her platform, her antennae twitching as she processed the scents and sounds of the chamber. Between them, floating above the center of the room, was Council Overseer. No one knew exactly what species belonged to. The Overseer appeared as a being of pure light contained within a crystalline shell, ancient beyond measure, had presided over the Council for thousands of years. "We gather today to address the matter of the conflict," announced. The Overseer's voice echoed through the chamber like wind through a canyon. 47 cycles have passed since hostilities began. Every attempt at peace has failed. We have invited the human delegation to provide a neutral assessment of the situation. Daniel felt hundreds of eyes turn toward him. He reached into his coat and pulled out the document he had been given. It was the prepared statement, written by council administrators. All he had to do was read it aloud. Declare the peace process dead, except that the war would continue forever. He looked down at the words on the page. Then he looked up at the two warring factions. Ambassador and High Speaker were glaring at each other across the chamber, their hatred almost visible in the air between them. Lisa leaned close to him. "Daniel, they are waiting." Daniel thought about his brother. He thought about the billions who had died in this senseless war. He thought about all the children on both sides who had grown up knowing nothing but conflict and loss. He set the document aside. Lisa's eyes went wide. "What are you doing?" Daniel stepped to the edge of the platform. His voice was calm but carried through the chamber's acoustic systems to every corner of the massive room. "Honored Council," he said, "I did not come here to declare failure. I came here to end a war." The chamber erupted in murmurs of shock and confusion. His crystalline form flickered with surprise. Ambassador leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. High Speaker's antennae snapped to attention. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Daniel, this is not what they asked for." Daniel looked at her with steady eyes. "I know," he said, "but it is what they need." He turned back to face the council, squared his shoulders, and prepared to do the impossible. The murmurs in the grand chamber grew louder. Species that had watched wars rise and fall for now stared at the lone human standing on his small platform. Daniel Carter waited for the noise to settle, his hands steady at his sides. Council Overseer raised a limb of pure light. "Human representative, you are summoned to deliver a neutral assessment, not to make declarations beyond your authority." "I understand, Overseer," Daniel replied. His voice remained calm. "But with your permission, I would like to speak freely before this council. I have something important to say." Was silent for a long moment. The crystalline shell surrounding the ancient being pulsed with soft colors, as if the Overseer was thinking deeply. Around the chamber, representatives whispered to each other in dozens of languages. "This is unusual," finally said. "But humanity is new to our galactic community. Perhaps their perspective deserves to be heard. You may speak freely, human." Daniel nodded his thanks. He looked across the vast chamber at the two warring delegations. Ambassador of the sat with his clawed hands gripping the arms of his chair, his yellow eyes burning with suspicion. High Speaker of the stood perfectly still, her compound eyes reflecting Daniel like 1,000 tiny mirrors. "I have spent the last 3 months studying your war," Daniel began. "I have read every report, every battle summary, every failed peace treaty. I have listened to speeches from both sides going back 47 years. He paused and let his words hang in the air. "And I have reached a conclusion that I must share with you." Ambassador let out a low hiss. "Speak then, human. Tell us what your infant species has learned about a conflict older than your entire spacefaring history." Daniel turned to face the ambassador directly. "I have learned that both sides are cowards." The chamber exploded. Shot to his feet, his scales flushing dark with rage. The delegation roared their anger, their voices echoing off the crystal ceiling. On the other side of the chamber, they clicked and chittered in fury, their limbs waving in aggressive patterns. "How dare you!" shouted. "They have fought with honor for generations. We have sacrificed millions of our finest warriors." High Speaker's voice cut through the noise, translated by the chamber's systems into harsh, cold words. The collective does not accept insults from a species that still counts its starships on two hands. We demand this human be removed immediately. Lisa grabbed Daniel's arm, her face pale. Daniel, you need to apologize. They will throw you out. They might declare Earth an enemy. Daniel gently removed her hand. Trust me, he said quietly. Then he raised his voice to address the chamber again. I did not call you cowards to insult you. I called you cowards because it is the truth, and someone needed to say it. The noise began to settle, though anger still burned in every corner of the room. Had not called for Daniel's removal. The overseer seemed curious, waiting to see where this would lead. Daniel stepped to the very edge of his platform. Let me explain what I mean. For 47 years, your two species have been killing each other. Entire generations have been born, raised, and died knowing nothing but this war. Children grow up learning to hate the other side before they learn to walk. He pointed toward the delegation. Ambassador, how many of your people have died in this conflict? His jaw tightened. Over 800 million have given their lives. Daniel nodded slowly. Then he turned to the High Speaker. How many of your collective have fallen? Santini drooped slightly. They have lost 1.2 billion souls. 2 billion lives, Daniel said. Gone. And for what? Can either of you tell me what victory would even look like anymore? What would you win that would be worth 2 billion dead? Neither ambassador answered. The chamber was silent. That is what I mean by cowardice, Daniel continued. It is not that your warriors lack bravery in battle. I am sure they fight with great courage, but continuing a war that cannot be won, sacrificing generation after generation for pride, refusing to admit that perhaps there is another way. That is not strength. That is fear. His voice was quieter now, but still hard. You do not understand. They attacked us first. They destroyed our colony ship without warning. 2,000 innocent civilians died in a single moment. We cannot forgive that. They attacked us first, countered immediately. They fired on our exploration vessel. 3,000 of our people were killed. We were only defending ourselves. You see, Daniel said, even now, after 47 years, you cannot agree on who started this. Both sides believe they were the victims. Both sides believe they are fighting a just war of defense. He looked between them, his expression serious but not angry. Has it ever occurred to either of you that maybe you are both wrong? Or maybe you are both right? Has anyone ever tried to find out what really happened that day, instead of just assuming the worst about each other? Ambassador shifted in his seat. The evidence was clear. Our ship's records showed the vessel powering weapons before the attack. Our records showed the same about your colony ship, replied. We had no choice but to defend ourselves. And neither of you found that strange, Daniel asked. Both sides saw the other powering weapons first. Both sides fired in self-defense. In my experience, when two stories do not match but both sides are certain they are right, it usually means there is a third story that nobody has found yet. The chamber grew very quiet. Representatives from other species leaned forward on their platforms, suddenly interested in a new way. Lisa stared at Daniel with wide eyes. She was beginning to understand what he was doing. Spoke the overseer's voice, thoughtful. Human representative, are you suggesting that the origin of this war is not as clear as both sides believe? Daniel met the overseer's glowing gaze. I am suggesting more than that, honored overseer. I am saying that I have found something in your historical archives, something that both sides missed, something that changes everything. And both turned to look at Daniel with new intensity. The anger in their eyes was fading, replaced by something else, uncertainty, and perhaps, just perhaps, a tiny spark of hope. I ask the Council's permission to access the historical display systems, Daniel said. I have evidence that I believe you all need to see. Considered for a moment, then nodded. Permission granted. Show us what you have found, human. Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment everything would change. Thank you, he said. What I am about to show you has been buried in corrupted files for 47 years, but the truth does not stay hidden forever. He activated his data pad and sent the signal to the chamber's holographic systems. Above the center of the room, light began to form into shapes and images. The truth was finally about to come out. The holographic display flickered to life above the center of the grand chamber. Stars appeared first, tiny points of light scattered across the darkness. Then a planet came into view, a small rocky world with no name, just a number in some old catalog. It orbited a dim red sun at the edge of unclaimed space. Daniel watched the faces of the council members as the image formed. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, digging through files that no one had looked at in decades. What he had found had kept him awake for 3 nights straight. This is the system, Daniel said. 47 years ago it was just an unremarkable point on star charts. No colonies, no resources worth fighting over, no strategic value, just empty space. He pressed a button on his data pad. 2 ships appeared in the hologram. One was clearly a long vessel with the distinctive red hull and angular design of their colony ships. The other was a rounded craft covered in sensor arrays like the exploration vessels their species favored. On the 12th day of the 4th cycle, 47 years ago, these 2 ships arrived in the system within hours of each other. The colony ship was carrying 2,000 civilians looking for a new world to settle. The exploration vessel had 3,000 crew members conducting a scientific survey. Ambassador's claws dug into his armrest. His scales had gone pale. Across the chamber, High Speaker stood frozen, her antennae pointed directly at the hologram. Neither ship expected to find anyone else there, Daniel continued. When they detected each other, both crews were surprised. According to records from both sides, there was initial communication. Nothing hostile, just 2 ships trying to figure out why the other was there. He paused and looked at the 2 ambassadors. And then something happened. Both ships recorded the other powering up weapons. Both captains ordered defensive responses. Within minutes, both ships were destroyed. We know all this, said. His voice was strained. The fired first. Their weapons powered up before ours. It is in our records. Our records show the opposite, replied, her translated voice tight with old pain. They targeted us first. We had no choice. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, that is what your records show, and for 47 years both sides have believed their own version of events. Neither side would accept the other's account, so the war began and it never stopped. He pressed another button. The hologram changed, showing dense lines of data scrolling across the display. When I was given access to the Council's historical archives, I started looking at the original sensor data from both ships, not the reports written afterward, not the summaries, the raw data. Leaned forward, the overseer's crystalline form pulsing with interest. And what did you find, human? I found corrupted files, Daniel said. Large sections of the sensor logs from both ships were damaged or missing. At first, I thought it was just decay over time. Old data breaks down. It happens. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as he could. But then I noticed a pattern. The corrupted sections were not random. They were specific. On both sets of records, the damage was in exactly the same time window, the 30 seconds before the shooting started. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the species who had seemed bored before were paying close attention. I asked the Council's technical experts to help me recover what they could from those corrupted files. It took 2 weeks of work, but we found something. Daniel pressed a final button. The hologram changed again. Now it showed the 2 ships as before, but between them, a third shape appeared. It was smaller than the others, dark and angular, with no markings or identification. There was a third ship in the system, Daniel said. The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Ambassador shot to his feet, his mouth open but no sound coming out. High Speaker's limbs trembled, her compound eyes locked on the hologram. This vessel was hiding in the shadow of a small moon, Daniel continued. It was using technology to mask its presence from standard sensors. But when the ships began scanning each other, tiny fragments of data about the third ship were accidentally captured. He pointed to the dark shape in the hologram. This ship belonged to a pirate faction called the Black Nebula Raiders. They operated in this region of space 47 years ago. They were known for attacking isolated vessels and stealing cargo. I remember them, said slowly. They were eventually destroyed by a coalition of species. They have been extinct for over 30 years. Yes, Daniel agreed. But 47 years ago they were still active, and on that day in the system they saw an opportunity. He brought up the recovered sensor data, showing weapon signatures and energy patterns. The Black Nebula Raiders fired on both ships simultaneously. They used weapons that mimicked an energy signatures. The ship detected what looked like weapons charging. The ship detected what looked like weapons charging. Daniel's voice was heavy with the weight of what he was revealing. Neither side fired first. Neither side attacked the other. You were both victims of the same trap. The pirates wanted you to destroy each other so they could salvage the wreckage. Sank back into his chair. His scales had gone gray and his eyes were distant. Across the chamber made a soft clicking sound that the translators rendered as a cry of grief. The pirates damaged or destroyed their own sensor traces before fleeing, Daniel said. By the time rescue ships arrived, both vessels were gone, and there was no evidence of the third ship. Each side recovered only their own records, which showed the other attacking first. He let the hologram fade. The chamber remained in stunned silence. For 47 years, Daniel said quietly, your people have been killing each other over a lie. Not a lie either of you told. A lie that was forced upon you by criminals who wanted to profit from your deaths. High Speaker spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 billion dead, because of pirates, because of a trick. Ambassador covered his face with his clawed hands. 800 million of my people, all of them believing they were fighting for justice, for vengeance against an unprovoked attack that never happened. Turned to Daniel, the overseer's light flickering with emotion. Human representative, this evidence must be independently, if what you say is true. I welcome verification, Daniel said. I have made copies of all the data available to council experts. Test it, check it. I am confident the truth will hold. The overseer nodded slowly. Then the question becomes, what do we do now? Every eye in the chamber turned to Daniel. He stood on his small platform, a single human among ancient beings from across the galaxy. But in that moment, he did not feel small. Now, he said, we end this. Daniel Carter stepped down from the human delegation's platform. The action drew gasps from around the chamber. The central floor of the grand chamber was sacred space, reserved only for council members and those given special permission to address the assembly. No human had ever walked there before. He moved slowly, deliberately, until he stood in the exact center of the room. Above him, the empty space where the hologram had shown the truth still seemed to shimmer with the ghosts of 2 lost ships. Council Overseer watched, but did not stop him. Perhaps the ancient being understood that some moments required breaking old rules. Daniel turned in a slow circle, looking at every delegation, every species, every face that watched him. Then his gaze settled on the 2 ambassadors who had spent their lives fighting a war that should never have happened. I know what you are feeling right now, he said. His voice was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. The truth does not make things easier. In some ways, it makes them harder. Ambassador looked up from his hands. His yellow eyes were wet with something that might have been tears if could cry. How can you know what we feel, human? Your species has never experienced anything like this. You are wrong, Daniel said. Humanity has experienced exactly this. Many times. Our history is filled with wars that started because of lies, conflicts that burned for generations because no one was willing to look for the truth. We have killed millions of our own kind over misunderstandings, over pride, over the fear of admitting we might have been wrong. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was old, printed on paper, showing two young men standing together with their arms around each other's shoulders. One of them was clearly a younger Daniel. The other had the same eyes, the same smile. "This is my brother," Daniel said. 8 years ago, he served on a human supply ship called the Morning Star. The ship strayed too close to a battle zone in your war. A patrol destroyed it. Everyone on board was killed. High Speaker's antennae drooped low. She said nothing, but her compound eyes seemed to dim. "I hated the after that," Daniel continued. "I hated them with everything I had. I wanted revenge. I wanted them to suffer the way I was suffering. That hatred almost destroyed me. I spent years trapped in it, unable to move forward, unable to let go." He looked directly at. "I blamed your entire species for my brother's death. I did not care that the patrol captain who gave the order was just one person. I did not care that most probably did not even know the Morning Star existed. I needed someone to hate, so I hated all of you." The chamber was completely still. Even the constant background noise of alien breathing and shifting bodies had stopped. "But eventually," Daniel said, "I had to make a choice. I could keep hatting, keep holding onto my pain and let it poison the rest of my life. Or I could try to understand, try to see things from the other side, try to find a path forward that did not lead to more death." He put the photograph back in his pocket, keeping his hand over it for a moment longer. "I chose to understand. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Forgiving the people I blamed for death felt like betraying his memory, but I realized something. My brother was a kind person. He believed in peace. He believed that different species could learn to live together. If he could see me consumed by hatred, it would break his heart." Daniel looked at both ambassadors now, his eyes moving between them. "The truth I showed you today does not erase 47 years of pain. It does not bring back the 2 billion lives that were lost. Nothing can do that. The dead are gone, and no amount of evidence or apologies will change that." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But you can change what happens next. Right now, at this moment, you have a choice. You can reject the truth because accepting it is too painful. You can go back to your fleets and order more attacks, more battles, more death. You can tell your people that the war must continue because stopping now would mean admitting that all those sacrifices were for nothing." His voice grew stronger, more passionate. "Or you can be the leaders who finally break the cycle. You can look at your people and tell them the truth. Yes, we were tricked. Yes, we lost generations to a lie, but we will not lose any more. We will honor the dead by choosing to live. We will show the galaxy that our species are more than just warriors. We are beings capable of growth, of change, of forgiveness." Ambassador stood slowly. His voice was rough. "You make it sound simple, human, but the hatred runs deep. There are alive today who have never known anything but war. How do I tell them to stop hating an enemy they have fought their entire lives?" "I do not have easy answers," Daniel admitted. "Peace is harder than war. Forgiveness takes more courage than fighting. But if you do not try, then the pirates win. Those criminals wanted you to destroy each other. Every day this war continues, their plan succeeds. Every death adds to their victory." He turned to, "High Speaker, your people have lost more in this war than any other. What would they say if they knew the truth? Would they want to keep fighting, knowing it was all based on a trick?" Was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her translated voice heavy with emotion. "The believe in the collective good. We fight because we believe it protects our hives. If fighting no longer serves that purpose, she trailed off. Daniel stepped closer to both of them, standing between the two platforms that had been separated by decades of hatred. I am asking you to do something that seems impossible. I am asking you to trust each other, even though trust has been broken 1,000 times. I am asking you to believe that the other side wants peace as much as you do. He stood as tall as he could, a single human facing the representatives of two ancient civilizations. The war ends now, he declared. His voice rang through the chamber with absolute conviction. Not tomorrow, not after one more negotiation, not after one more battle to settle old scores. Now, today, in this chamber. The words seemed to echo long after he stopped speaking. Daniel held his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done everything he could. He had given them the truth. He had shared his own pain. He had asked for the impossible. Now it was up to them. And looked at each other across the chamber. For 47 years, that look had meant only hatred and death. But now something else flickered in their eyes. Uncertainty, exhaustion, and perhaps buried deep beneath all the scars of war, a tiny flame of hope. Daniel waited, barely breathing, for their answer. The silence in the grand chamber stretched on for what felt like hours. Daniel stood in the center of the floor, his declaration still hanging in the air. Around him, 200 species waited to see what would happen next. Ambassador was the first to move. The old rose from his seat and walked to the edge of his platform. His movements were slow, heavy with the weight of 47 years of war. Human, he said. His voice was tired, stripped of the anger that had filled it earlier. Do you know what you are asking of me? My father died in this war. My children have died in this war. I have spent my entire adult life fighting the... You are asking me to tell my people that it was all for nothing. Daniel nodded slowly. I am not asking you to say it was for nothing. I am asking you to say it meant something. That the sacrifice of your people taught you something so valuable that you will never let it happen again. Stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to look across the chamber at High Speaker. The leader had not moved from her position. Her compound eyes reflected the light in shifting patterns, making it impossible to read her expression. But her antennae were tilted forward, listening, considering. Said, it was the first time Daniel had heard either of them address the other by name. Is the human right? Have we been killing each other over a lie? Clicked softly before responding. The evidence appears genuine. Our own analysts are reviewing the data now, but even without full verification, there are questions I cannot ignore. She paused. Why did both our ships detect the other firing first? In all my years, I never had a good answer. I simply accepted that they were liars. And I accepted the same about the admitted. Perhaps, said slowly, we were both too quick to believe the worst about each other. Perhaps that is the true lesson here. Council Overseer floated forward, the ancient being's crystalline form catching the light. The council recognizes the weight of this moment. Whatever you decide, it will be recorded in the archives of history. Choose wisely. Took a deep breath, his scales shifting color as emotions moved through him. The Empire is tired, Overseer. We have fought for so long that we have forgotten what peace feels like. Our young people know nothing but war. Our economy exists only to build weapons. Our culture has become nothing but songs of battle and revenge. He looked at Daniel again. You asked if we could tell our people to stop hating their enemy. I do not know if I can do that. Hatred does not disappear with a speech or a treaty. No, Daniel agreed. It does not. Healing will take time, maybe generations, but it has to start somewhere. It has to start with someone brave enough to take the first step. Moved then, walking to the edge of her own platform. She was close enough now that Daniel could see the intricate patterns on her exoskeleton, marks that indicated age and status among her people. The collective has lost more hives than I can count, she said. Each one was a family, a community, a piece of our civilization gone forever. When I think of peace, I think of those empty spaces. I think of all the voices that will never speak again. Her antennae drooped low. But I also think of the hives that still survive, the children who are growing up right now, preparing to become soldiers in a war they did not choose. If I can give them a different future, do I have the right to refuse? She looked at, for 47 years that look would have been filled with hatred. Now it held something different, understanding, and a question. If I agree to peace, said, will you keep your word? Will they stop attacking our worlds? Was quiet for a moment. Then he straightened, standing as tall as his aged body would allow. I will, he said. On my honor and on the memory of all those we have lost, I will work for peace. Not because I have forgiven the past, not because the pain is gone, but because continuing this war would dishonor everyone who has died on both sides. He extended his clawed hand across the empty space between the platforms. Let it end. Let it finally end. Hesitated, every eye in the chamber watched her. Daniel held his breath. Then she reached out and touched her limb to his hand. It was not a handshake in the human sense, but it was a gesture, a beginning. The chamber erupted in sound, not the angry shouts of before, but gasps and murmurs of disbelief. Some species began to applaud. Others made clicking or humming sounds that their cultures used to express approval. A few delegates simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. His voice rose above the noise. Let the record show that on this day, the Empire and the Collective have declared an immediate ceasefire. Formal peace negotiations will begin within one cycle. The overseer turned to Daniel, who still stood in the center of the floor. Human representative, said, in 10,000 years of presiding over this council, I have never seen anything like what you have done today. A species as young as yours, ending a war that has claimed billions of lives. History will remember this moment. Daniel shook his head. I did not end anything, overseer. They did. He gestured toward the two ambassadors. All I did was give them the truth and ask them to be brave. The hard work is just beginning. Peace is not a moment. It is a choice that has to be made every day. Later, after the formal announcements and the beginning of ceasefire negotiations, Daniel and Lisa found a quiet observation deck overlooking the station's main docking area. Through the transparent walls, they could see ships from both fleets holding position. Weapons that had been ready to fire were now powering down. Lisa leaned against the railing, her face still showing traces of shock. I cannot believe that actually worked. I thought they were going to have you arrested. Daniel smiled slightly. Honestly, so did I, but sometimes people just need someone to say what everyone is already thinking. They were tired. They wanted it to end. They just needed permission to stop fighting. The news is spreading, Lisa said, checking her communication device. Every station in the sector is reporting on the human who ended the forever war. You are famous, Daniel. He shook his head. I do not want to be famous. I just wanted to stop the killing. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. A warship passed slowly by the station, its weapons dark. Somewhere out there, on both sides of the former battle lines, families would soon learn that their loved ones might actually come home. Lisa looked at Daniel. What are you thinking about? Daniel reached into his pocket and touched the photograph that was still there. His brother's face smiled up at him from the past. I was thinking about, he said quietly. He always believed that peace was possible. He used to say that people are more alike than different, no matter what species they are. I wish he could have seen today. He looked out at the ships, at the stars, at the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. It is over, he whispered. It is finally over. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter in response, and for the first time in years, Daniel Carter felt at peace.